All right, we are in. This is it. We are live.
I have so many questions.
Yeah. Just to know how it all works. How's this work, man?
Well, no, the countdown. What, like, who was that person? Why did it say? What?
Dude, it's magic. It's
No, it's
magic. It's
not.
it's the little people inside of your computer. They just, yeah, yeah. All right, so listen, we are in gonna have a conversation today with the two special guests. Uh, One is the Doctor of Dialogue, Lori Mulvey, but the other is an old friend who's younger than me, who I've really been wanting to have a conversation with on the stream. And hopefully, I'm assuming, and I'm thinking is the first of many, many, many conversations. Dan O'Connell, man,
He's like, no
Professor. Dude, Dan, welcome, man. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, listen, I want to say something though. And Lori, you can jump in also about who this guy is.
Okay.
Dan. So I've been teaching for 41 years, man. And Dan, you were in class. When was that? 95 or 96?
I think it was
When I
95.
first met you.
I think it was 95.
Summer of 95.
It was
Yeah.
95.
Was it a
And
summer class? I don't remember it being a summer class, but that could just be.
Yeah, I think it was the summertime.
It
Yeah.
was a long time ago.
And you and then so you took that class and we got to know each other, became friends, and then you and I taught a class together on the drug war. And I made you co-instructor. We changed the title of the class, so I got in trouble for that. I got reprimanded I got called down to the principal's office and
I
reprimanded.
don't remember
for
you
that.
getting reprimanded, but maybe you didn't tell me.
Yeah, I didn't tell you. It was after you were long gone by then, and because I changed the title. And who is this Dan O'Connell guy? And once they found out you were a student, they were really pissed
Oh yeah, I'm
because
sure.
you were an undergrad student. But I decided I got to teach a class with this guy, and so this is just for folks watching the stream. To this day, I identify you as the most brilliant former student that I've ever had. And I would say one of the most brilliant thinkers of anybody in my life. Yeah. When I say one of, there's only a couple other ones who are alongside of you. So anyway, so there it is, man. And you are a professor down at senior researcher at University of Delaware.
I am the senior scientist at the Center for Drug and Health Studies, which is a title they give you when you get old because you're senior.
Yeah.
And I'm also currently the associate director of our center, which I'm still not sure what it means, but they pay me more, so I took it.
You accept it.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Off that way, it's because we have bird feeders out there, and the crows like to come in and like eat all of it. And I'm seeing crows, so I'm going to try to not
And
go.
and if you see me looking this way, it's because I'm watching the hawks going by looking for crows. So
Oh, you send them down here because we.
All right, so listen, you guys.
Yes.
So I want to have a conversation today about truth, but I want to talk about a particular angle of it.
Dan. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the issue.
All truth is beauty, and all beauty is some bullshit.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. All right. So look, I want to know. So you are two people for whom I have the utmost respect for your intellect. Okay. And also you're two people who I've never ever heard either of you talk about how there's ever anywhere you go that you're the smartest person in the room kind of thing, right? That statement. But the fact is that you are both often the smartest person in the room, and in many of the rooms that you are in. And I want to know that in particular, in these times that we're in right now, how do you manage that you have such complicated thoughts about what's going on in the world, and you're so often having to listen to or read writings from or watch videos of people who really don't have much of an idea of what's going on? And yet, I never hear either of you be arrogant. I never hear either of you talk about people being really stupid or that person's really stupid. Certain, well, at least it's very rare. So how do you manage that? How do you deal with that? Like, what are you thinking in these times, man? So we're just going to start the conversation right there. And whichever one of you wants to go first.
Well, I could say something, Dan, which I'm sure will spark your mind. You used the word truth a little bit ago, and truth is ever unfolding to this human mind and experience of life on Earth, right? In other words, because there's so many dimensions of what I imagine must be true, that I'm always seeking what is true. And so this moment, and that's not because I don't think there's anything that's true. I actually do think there are truths, but I don't know. Well, it's a process to uncover what those are. But anyway, in this time, I am just highly curious. It's not the only feeling I have, but I'm highly curious about what is true that I didn't know before, right? Whether it's some versions of issues that have never come to the surface as clearly for me, or just the ways humans are, or the ways we respond to things, or who is the person that sees something more true than I've seen before. So that's like the main frame of walking through this time, is that there's so much to look at and actually try to discern in the ways that I guess I know I always have. So that's just where I start.
All right. Dan-O. I like that, by the way. That's cool.
Huh?
No, I like what Lori just said. That gets my brain going.
I have alternative facts on this
Which
stuff.
there are many.
Yeah, there's we can get into the, how do you know what is true and what isn't? And I think there's a field of epistemology and stuff that kind of looks at this. But so without getting all weird about it, are we talking, like, if you're just talking about the current climate, right?
Yeah, current climate, man. Just what we see.
What is true and what is not is often, like if outside of like mathematics and things like that, truths, there's like a proof of a truth and those kind of things. But in the world where we live, this stuff's very subjective, right? I mean, so I kind of almost come at it the other way. Like I can spot bullshit, right? I can spot untrue, like that's just factually wrong, right? And there's lots of things that are factually wrong that are, you turn on your TV or pick up a newspaper any day, and there's a lot of just untrue things out there in that, somebody says this happened and it's demonstrable that it did not, or this should have happened and it's demonstrable that it did, those kind of things. But then there's this whole weird gray zone about, what is, like, it's real easy to move from truth to right, so, and I think that's where it gets real gray, because people I guess people say a lot of things that are very opinion-esque, if you will, as facts and as truths, I mean, my brother does this to me all the time. He'll state his opinion as though it's just, like written in stone or something. And I'm like, dude, that's like an opinion. Yeah, but it's true. And, and that's all fine when you're sitting, down at the pub arguing about, the best record of 2025. Those are opinion kind of things. But I think in this environment, in this media environment, where you can jump into any well that you want and get people's opinions delivered to you as truth, it gets gray. That's probably a horrible answer, but
no, it's a good start.
I don't actually spend a lot of time thinking about as much what is true. And I know you said too, Dan, you were just like, I can say that's bullshit, right? So you're looking at what's not true. But I think it's more of a premise that I have, not that I'm like, oh, let me just note what all of the truths are. It's more of that a premise that there are things that are true, and we don't know. We walk through the world needing to know more of what's true than we ever have. And yet we still have to live in this world. And like, you don't know what's the perfect response to your child's X need at this time. And yet you still have to respond. And so I feel less interested in what is the exact truth, although certainly I'd love that, to know that, but more about how we manage the gray that is most of our lives. And I think we fail to realize that, I mean, at least how I see it is, everybody has a piece, and probably every creature has a piece of this thing. And so I always get to, instead of fighting about what's the truth, let me just learn the different pieces and operate with more information, if you will, than the limited things that I can put together and decide are true, or that I can argue with you about whether they are true or not. So it's yet even a different way, I think, of approaching it. Which, we're not talking about disinformation and misinformation and purposeful ways that we are all confused by things just for other reasons, but just in terms of the individual human need to know what the hell is real. That's how I approach it.
Dan, I have a question that I want to bounce off, but do you have a response to that first?
Not yet.
So now I'm thinking, so you just mentioned disinformation. There's that, but how do you live with, okay, so
can I just say that the world is full of misinformation, and I would say most of it is not because we're trying to trick people, but because we only can know what we know, right? If you devote your life to studying something, no matter who you are, whether you're a plumber or a farmer or a philosophy professor, you're studying something, right? So you know a lot about that thing, but you only know part of it. So you're going to say things or operate on things that aren't fully true because you only know a piece of it. And that's, where was I going with that? My mind just went blank. Where was I going? What was your question? So I can get back to I can bring it around.
I didn't ask a question yet, but I was thinking about misinformation. I was saying that.
So in the process of living, right? Like the plumber, the electrician, the farmer may tell a next person something that isn't fully true, but they're not intending to, right? It's because they just don't know this other angle that they might have known 10 years from now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's happening all the time. So this isn't like a new thing that we're now just suddenly trying to figure out what's true and what isn't, right?
Yeah. Dano?
See, now I'm getting distracted by the crows and the chat, so I'm probably going to, well, part of it,
don't pay attention to the chat yet. Go ahead.
There's a certain who gives a shit about this, right? Okay, something is true. Things that were taken for granted as 100% true 100 years ago, we now know are false, right? So is it more about truth? What is truth? What is truth is a Johnny Cash song, but like in terms of what's useful to us about, and again, it's like, okay, this is bullshit, this is useful. Like maybe valid is a better term than true.
Okay.
Because, you know, not to get all weird and go back to my sociology grad school days or any of that shit, but you know, the whole thing about validity claims and being able to demonstrate the validity of a claim in an arena that is actually seeking to like try to figure something out between two choices. So where you're trying to solve something, you know, pick it, immigration. Okay. Immigration is useful to, let's just use America for fun. Although it might be more fun to use Germany right now if you're reading your paper, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, what is the truth of immigration in a place like Germany or America, which is, you know, we're more familiar with that, right? Is it useful? Is it not useful? And then how do you get into those types of things? So rather than, I think, focusing on, you know, well, what is truth? I think it's very contextual, temporal, and well, those I was going to say situational, but
Okay.
now being redundant.
You know,
All
but
right.
I think we get into this, or we say the word true when we're fighting with people, right? And we're like, that's not true. I didn't do that. You did that first. No, I didn't. You did this other
Right.
thing. And I think that's actually what we're dealing with more practically, is like, we are in conflict. The humans are in conflict about everything. I mean, you know, that's not new. That's not saying something particularly meaningful, but I think it's why we use that, like, that's not fair. We don't have to talk about justice to be like in an argument about what's fair, right? And it's the same thing with truth. We don't have to get into all of the philosophy of it to be like, this is what happens to people when they are at odds with each other. And so then it's like, oh no, that didn't happen like that in Germany. This didn't happen like that on the border. And it's like, okay. So then what are we actually talking about? But for me, I find that when people are in conflict, actually recognizing that they're all or both or whomever saying something true matters. It matters to de-escalating, and it matters to actually building some kind of collaboration. So for me, true is a very practical tool that actually we have to use in a way that most people don't, which is to realize that everybody has a piece of it, you know?
So how do you deal? So I'm watching things now. You know, day in and day out, I'm reading stuff, and I'm reading just the most inane,
Stop it!
insane. Stop reading. Just stuff that I just like. Oh my God, this is really are people really buying this? And it appears as though they are, or it just doesn't matter.
People are arguing with themselves. I mean, no, sorry. People are arguing with other people. So much of our media right now, I mean, even our, whatever we want to call thoughtful media, whatever they are, thoughtful people, you're arguing with someone else that isn't in front of you in a lot of ways, Sam. And I'm just taking one part of what you're saying as like to respond to, but I find myself just like, could you just go talk to those people, whoever those people are, and stop talking to the people that you think agree with you so that we can just do something with all of this? I'm finding a lot of things are just tiring in that way. Like, I don't need to hear another argument about the same thing to the same people. Talk to them.
Yeah, but we've got, we have these layered systems, national, global, international, you know, that are being reshaped by information that is misinformation, that people just outright lying, outright saying things that are just insane and absurd.
I'm just going to say can I just say one more quick thing? Just as someone who's in this like communication conflict realm forever, we have taken all the failures of communication between humans, right, and blown them up to the most immense proportions without actually giving a shit about communication technologies between people that some of us study and know about and practice and care about. And now it's just like, it's a free for all at a level that we can't rein it back anytime soon.
But it's fun.
Oh, but it's definitely engaging.
Well, here's the thing. People basically like to fart around and have fun, right? So if I'm on the internet or at the club or whatever, people don't want to get into arguments. They want to be validated.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, Lori, oh my God, what you said makes so much sense. That was just, most people really don't want to have a constructive back and forth, give and take conversation. Yeah. They want to put on their jersey and get patted on the back for wearing that jersey. Our world has become super, super, super duper, campy, and shirt wearing, jersey oriented. And so I think, we say, well, we believe this. I always say, rule number one, check ourselves. Are we full of shit? Maybe we're not viewing things, the way we think, well, it's obvious that, whatever. Having made some mistakes in my time, I have believed things that were going to work a certain way that didn't, believe things were true that weren't. So I think we just need to be a little careful. I think the whole world could be a little bit more careful, because like the way stuff's flying around right now, what's the old thing? A lie's halfway around the world before the truth gets its shoes on. Yeah. I think that's Mark Twain or somebody,
but how, so for you, so Dan, for sure, one of the things that when we get together and we start talking about stuff, I'm laughing, I mean, what you just said, it's fun. Right.
Yeah.
And so it is fun. It's fun to listen to you go off on, just have fun with it, play with ideas. Then Lori and I both, every time you leave, we're laughing, and is that it? Like, is that the response? Right. I mean, is that
what?
Like, how do you get there? How do you keep laughing when you know everything that you know and you see it and you just,
I am a little bit old school, right? I have a belief that your influence in the world is going to be largely among people you touch, right? And I don't just mean physically, but I mean our influence is probably a lot smaller than we would like to believe, right? Yeah. So I can have a conversation with the two of you and, oh my God, the world's crazy and all this crazy shit. Did you read about what happened over in Timbuktu somewhere? I'm not getting on a plane to Timbuktu to try to solve that problem. When it comes to like making a difference, I think it's a much smaller worldview in terms of the people that are like my responsibility, the people that I interact with, that I can actually do something about. That is a much more serious thing, and there making the right decision becomes meaningful, and part of it is we're just kind of, and I know Sam, Lori, and my hunch is, people that are tuning into something like this are interested in information because we have a certain curiosity. Right? Mm-hmm. Not everybody has that curiosity. I'm literally right now, I'm thinking of a friend of mine with whom I had a falling out because he went way, way down a Christian right wormhole a number of years ago. You two have met him.
Yeah.
And he was telling me one time, he's like, what are you talking about? I can tell you everything you need to know in 5 seconds. And I was just like, dude, and he has a very, and I meet a lot of people like this, a very set worldview, a very limited curiosity about that worldview or other worldviews. And so he and many people are, and left and right, by the way. I'm not, I happen to be thinking on the right, but there are plenty of people on the left who's the same way, who don't want their truth challenged. People are posting over here about, the subjectivity of truth. Well, if truth is subjective, then I'm full of shit. All right. And then we need to embrace our poop, if you will. Pardon the metaphor. I probably should have come up with something.
No, that's a good one.
But you know what you just said though is it really important, and the part about people don't want to change their worldview, right? It's like but the way we walk through the world is part of being sane in what I think is an insane set of circumstances where you're born onto a planet. You don't know everything you need to know. You don't know why you're here. You don't know where it's going. You're going to lose your life eventually. All these things make no sense. And so to think I should keep changing how it is I've figured out to get through this insanity is asking a lot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I don't want anything to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
I have my belief system. It's here. And that's why I was kind of does it really matter? Does it matter if it's right or wrong? If it works for me, if it has utility for me, if my beliefs are, who gives a shit whether it's true or not, right? If it helps get me through the day, right, in a way that I don't go crazy, in a way that I'm there for people who need me, right? Because I think we all have that. There are some basic human things that I think, interestingly, I think we actually do share. Maybe that's where you start drilling into truth, right? There are some things that go across all of this. Maybe that's actually the starting point instead of, pick the political topic or whatever of the day and then start lining up truth points for and against.
But that's actually, I think what you're saying, it's taking me to, we're talking about multiple things at the same time, right? Because they almost seem like they're all at the same level. But when you have the ability, so yes, if I can be sane and a good person and live a life that's, honorable on some level with whatever I think, that the sky is green and whatever, who cares? But what happens is that there are also people at a different level who can manipulate those very simple, what do I want to say? Honest ways of living at a mass scale, which is what we're talking about, especially when we're talking about media and social media, et cetera. And then you start to manipulate populations. And I hate to say that we are in that world. I mean, I don't want to take it to something that's abstract that we can't touch, but I think, it's not just what do I think versus what does this person in power think? What's the level of the influence that what my little mind thinks is compared to someone who's leading a country,
Well, but this isn't new. This is, from the invention of the megaphone. I think the Greeks talked about the sophists and all that shit and how you can use language to manipulate people. But
absolutely.
Why else have language?
Right.
Hey,
why else start speaking?
What the hell? Manipulation has been around, and people use it in small and large ways.
Yeah. Well, right? Some people, what is people say? It's an interpersonal way of saying somebody's trying to. It's like trying to convince me of their. Hang on a minute. It's such a beautiful way of saying it, but I can't get to it at the moment. But the point is, it's like we're always trying to convince people to get on our way of seeing our platform, what we want, right?
Because that validates us.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Well, so speaking of validating
my worldview, and then I'm more comfortable in thinking, well, maybe I am right.
Yeah. Well, okay. So here, speaking of validating, so me as a professor, I think my job is, I'm professing. Yeah. I don't like to profess, but I do like to encourage people to think in a more complicated way than however they're thinking at any moment, right? But then You got all these other forces and people out there that are just operating in a very manipulative way and
Maybe
undermining
but I know,
undermining everything I'm trying to do.
but but just because that's what you do or that's what a profession does doesn't mean it's a great idea, right? I mean, obviously, it seems like this is another one of those challenges for us as people, right? It's like we learn things and then some of us want to help other people, so we say, by telling them.
Yeah.
Believe it. Some of us do, some of us don't. Who cares? But like just the very idea that we want to profess to people is not
or that I think it's a good idea that people think in more complicated ways. Just that very premise there. Why would that be a good idea? Given what Dan, you were saying about like people don't want it.
Maybe it's not. Maybe our big complicated brains are just making a mess out of things. I mean, Kurt Vonnegut wrote about that in a number of novels about how
like every one of them.
So
we overthink stuff and come to these ridiculously wrong conclusions. That in retrospect, it was like, what were we thinking? It's like, hey, it made sense at the time. I teach a criminology class and I use examples in my crim class, right? And I tell my students, I'm like, what you have to understand is that every person that robs a Wawa or a Sheetz to you folks, it made perfect sense to that individual to rob the Sheetz in that moment. Was that a good idea? I've talked to these people who have done these types of things and they'll tell you, I don't know what, I hear it all the time. I don't know what I was thinking. But in that moment, it made sense or you wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, that's right.
So we are very good at convincing ourselves of things, and Sam, you bring people to class. Well, they sign up for your class. They pay for class.
They pay a lot of money for it.
And so they voluntarily come to hear what you have to be manipulated by you into your worldview and way of thinking, right? So when somebody on the right is we're all playing the same game in a way, and we say, well, we're doing it to make the world a better place. So are they.
I wouldn't.
So someone on the right, someone on the left, they're all trying to do the exact same thing.
Right.
To manipulate
and who's wrong? Like I like to think I know, and I have opinions on all of this, but
I think I wouldn't. I don't even use. I mean, I have to talk about right and left because that's just the lexicon, and I mean that's a reality that we're in. But
you go to Germany and talk about right and further right.
But I think for me the what do I want to say? I guess, Dan, I just wouldn't. I don't see them as the right. I see them as everybody because I think that all groups of people and what we hear of those groups of people, you're usually always hearing the extremes of their views. And so I think it's just easy to not pay attention to whatever. I do not consider myself left or right. I have voted for both parties in my lifetime at the presidential level. I'll just say that here, but I don't consider myself either. And
Did you vote for Trump?
Sorry?
You vote for Trump?
Nope, not this time.
Oh, not this time? Interesting.
Remember, I've been voting for presidents for a long time.
Bye.
But I really,
remember we talk about Lori's first dealings with Trump were in the mid '80s in New Jersey, man. So that was like
somebody from New Jersey is very related. That's not. No, I thought you were going to just talk about when I first met you, and I.
Oh yeah.
Damn,
you were a Reaganite, a Reagan youth member. Yeah.
Oh, the glory days of Reagan.
Yeah, that liberal, that radical liberal.
We could go back to the glory days of Reagan.
But I do want to say that I think every time I hear Actually, I will say this, that when President Trump was before he was elected and he was campaigning, whatever that year was, 16, 15, 16.
15, 16, yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking about building a wall. I would say, I mean, now I'm like, oh my God, I was so ignorant, because I was like, what's he talking about? I mean, obviously I know that we are a country of immigrants, but I did not know the level of immigration that was happening, or whatever, and whatever to a degree it's a crisis or it isn't, right? I did not know. And so I use that example because I thought, like, who is this person? He's like making up an issue. And I mean, it's easy to realize that it is an issue. It's a huge issue. And depending on where you stand, it means different things, right? It actually means all the things. But what I'm saying is, whenever I listen to someone, right, whether they're on the right or the left, but I just want to stay with the right at this moment, I'm like, yeah, there's a core of truth to what you're saying. And if I don't even see what it is, I'm trying to find it, because I believe that there's a core of truth to it. And depending on where we stand, we see different things that other people don't, right? So I just feel frustrated by at least from people working at a university, I feel frustrated by what has happened to the right from the perspective of the university, which has very much trampled upon any ideas that are from the right. That's what I've witnessed. And so I very much, I think we're more ignorant as a result, and we don't train people to be smarter, whether you're right or left, when you just think like, those are bad ideas. They're not bad ideas. They have to be built. And anyway, so I always feel smarter when I listen to things that I initially think that must not be true at all. What is that all about? And, for some people that's frightening, but for me, it actually feels grounding to say what actually is happening in this world.
I think, for me, that's also my struggle. I mean, Lori, you and I, every day, we're trying to disentangle things that we hear and say, wait, hang on, like, play that back, and let's play it back more slowly, and let's listen to what's being said. And then we find something in it that makes sense. I think for me right now, one thing that I am struggling with, and I can't do it in my classroom, and I can hardly do it in the office hours here, because I just do it live, is just the layers of just dumb and manipulative thinking that I hear in the public sphere. And I can't say anything, because if I say something, I feel like I'm going to come off as arrogant, and I don't want to come off as arrogant. And so then I just hold a certain silence and just kind of zip my mouth shut. And even on the stream, a lot of times people will ask questions, or like in office hours, people ask questions, back and forth on different things. And I have sometimes have something I really want to say that sounds something like, that's just really stupid, like, really, honestly, or it's just so wrong. But I don't. I've just trained myself to not do any of that, and it's been good for me, because it means I don't speak quickly, and then I take a step back and I hear something that maybe I didn't hear before. But man, sometimes it gets really difficult to do that.
Well, there's two things. One is you're in the business of working with people who have decided that they want to take time to think and be educated in a certain way, right? So you're in that process with them, right? And then part of that process is saying what you think, exploring what you think, hearing what other people think. So yeah, that's the role that you're in, right? That you have to be in that. So I don't know that. But I want to say something as somebody who has been listening to young people since the 80s about like talking about social issues. And because I think it fits with some part of the frustration that you're talking about, and maybe that we're all talking about. And that is that for some significant portion of the time that I've been listening to young people, they've been talking about race in the United States, right? And we've been figuring out what's going on in this generation, and what about this, and what about that, and whatever, right? And that led us to anyway. And what I noticed, and I started noticing this in the mid to early 2000s. So this is a long time ago. I started noticing that people were coming into these conversations and into the university with already this really clear thought about race in the United States, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, you're 18. You don't know that much yet, right? I mean, we all have our own experiences, of course, and those I always center. But like, I started to see this generationally. And so what I think we've also all of us seen is how we've developed some singular narratives about race, about many things, but I'm saying race, that then lead people to say ignorant things because they're not actually observing the world, asking mm-hmm. questions, mm-hmm. wondering, having their own experiences. They've been told what to think. Again, not at every level, but that's what I started to see. I was like, oh my goodness, like the questions we used to be able to ask, the things that people were wondering about, they're not wondering anymore. They already know, which is like, okay, you've learned some things, but to what end? And what I saw over and over was a lot of closed thinking then on mm-hmm, that, right? Mm-hmm. So like we're always trying to figure out like, what is to be educated by learning about something, and what is it to have your mind closed by ideas from other people, right? And so I think we've seen, anyway, I've been able to watch that with that issue, and it's been fascinating to me in terms of all the things that you're talking about you struggle with, Sam. Mm-hmm, the things mm-hmm. that you were saying about, like, I don't say anything, because in some ways you can't say something. It's a whole, mm-hmm. it's a whole mm-hmm. thing.
mm-hmm. Dano?
I don't have anything to say.
Yeah. Oh man, I find that.
Although
what do you?
While you were talking, let's keep in mind, we have some selection bias at work here when we talk about interacting with people, because we're interacting, right? You have professors, you have students. The one thing we have in common is that we're all at a university where the vast majority of people are not. And so there's a little funnel in front of us filtering in the type of people who want to have these conversations and do these kind of things. And the people who don't or are unable to have these conversations are not. And it's not like they're sitting at home thinking, oh, I wish I understood more about the world. I mean, they probably are, but not in this kind of a way. We always talk about the onion, right? Some people peel the onion to deeper and deeper levels of the onion, but where everybody stops eventually on the onion. Some people are very deeply into the onion, and some people are very close. But the people who stop very close to the surface think they're at the end of the onion, right? It's like, hey, I'll tell you everything you need to know in 5 minutes. Because I've got it all figured out. And there is a lack of curiosity among some people. And we are prison. I was just reading that Ian said he didn't notice racism until he went to jail and prison. And that's probably true.
Is that, yeah. Do you have something to say about that?
All I can say about that really is that because I was in prison, and I being a white guy in a largely black prison was a very interesting thing from a race perspective, and it was don't get me wrong, I got along fine. But it definitely it's like that Star Trek episode where everything's kind of flipped. But
actually, Dan, I was going to ask. It's funny because I was also reading the comment and other comments too, and in that moment, I was going to say to you, even unrelated.
Hey, by
to
the way,
comment,
I'm listening. I'm listening. So I'm just gonna kill my camera for a second. Go ahead.
Okay. I was thinking we should talk more specifically now about some of your work, because I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine who is in prison yesterday, and we were just talking about how most people don't get to see inside and get to know the experience, right? And so in service of this conversation about what's true, it feels like we should just turn the conversation a little bit into this world that most people don't even see, and see what we can see, from starting with your perspective, what you've seen, as somebody who's been in prison, but also then someone who's studied and spent time with so many other people who've been in prison.
Don't go to prison.
That's the truth.
My first advice is you want to avoid that if you can. But a lot of the work that we're doing is we do a lot of different things. For those who don't know, which is pretty much everybody here except two of you, I'm at the University of Delaware. We do a lot of research in our shop, both in prisons and with police, which is weird from somebody who many years ago ended up on the wrong side of all that. So there's to get to truth. Let me see if I can actually make this relevant, right? There are discourses, right? There are academic and policy related discourses which move over time, right? And so what was true before may not be true now, and what is true now may not be true in the future. So a lot of our research has focused on rehabilitation kind of efforts within correctional settings. I've been doing that for a long time. And there's reasons for that, both in the immediate, is program A any better than program B? But there's also a larger kind of discourse related thing. If you go back to the late 70s and the whole nothing works era, where correctional people and government people decided that rehabilitation was not a worthy objective. And by the way, prison populations exploded not long after that because the focus shifted on identifying the most at-risk people and incarcerating them for longer periods. That's a discourse kind of thing, a shift in truth, if you will, from there are causes of crime that are malleable and that can be addressed, to, oh, there's nothing we can do except keep these dangerous people away from the rest of us, right? And then the pendulum kind of swung back the other way. I'm happy to say I was part of that by supplying some of the evidence that feeds that discussion, right? Mm-hmm. So that's influencing discourse, influencing truth, if you will. And now, like, that gets carried to other places. We now have the prison abolition movement, where people are saying we should just do away with prisons. I'm not in that camp, although I respect some of those people. Don't get me wrong. I think we could let out half the people, at least in our prisons tomorrow, and have zero impact on crime. So if we're using prisons to prevent crime, we're doing it wrong. But there are other reasons, you can talk about retribution and things. Anyway.
Wait, hang on. Okay, wait, hang on. I'm just going to hit pause right there. We're going to just go down this rabbit hole. So here you are, a really smart, thoughtful,
that's debatable.
Intellect. Oh no, but hang on. Smart, thoughtful, intellect practitioner who you spend your life talking to police, studying courts, talking to judges, talking to prisoners, be going into prisons, teaching in prisons, having been in prisons. This is it. This is you. I mean, you're not ideologically left or right. Lori and I can vouch for that for sure. I never know what you're going to think about a particular topic, except that you're going to laugh at it and have something snarky and then something really interesting to say.
Clark Max should have been the MVP this year. True. Fact.
So, okay, but you just said, I think we could let out about half the people who are in prison, and we wouldn't even see a noticeable bump in crime at all. Zero impact, basically, which is near zero impact, right? I guarantee that all sorts of people who don't know a damn thing about crime and the whole everything that you deal with day after day, and they're going to assume that you're a liberal, that you're a part of the prison abolition movement, et cetera. How do you get to that? And what do you say to them? What do you say to those people who right now are going like, this guy's fucking, he's nuts. Like, he has no idea what he's talking about.
We haven't done the experiment, right? We did the experiment in California because the courts ruled that it was inhumane for them to be keeping people at the level they were keeping people. So they let out a whole shitload of people. There was no impact on the crime rate in California, but it turned out a lot of those people went from state prisons to county jails. And so without doing the study the right way, it's hard to determine the true, if you will, impact, right? So this all gets caught up in discourse and discussion, and like this is where I view the university is coming in, is like we are putting little pieces of, this is a kernel of truth, by the way, also known as a Skittle, little pieces of truth on the pile, and that can be a research finding or a discussion, or Sam and Lori influencing people to see things from a different perspective in a classroom, and those people go on to influence the discourse in their own way, and so this is how things kind of shift over time, right? Now, I don't want to stay on a prison thing, altogether. I don't know if you've heard of, right up there with abolish prisons is defund the police, right? And I'm at a university. Oh my God, defund the police was everywhere down here a couple years ago. I work with a lot of police, and the weird thing is that what's coming out of the defund the police is a change in policing that is happening in American culture that actually started before any of this within police departments who were tired of locking the same people up time and time again. And so they had already begun looking at different deflection and diversion models with substance users, people with mental health issues, things like that, to try to like divert those people away from the system. We're doing stuff on that down here now too. And it's amazing some of the impacts that you can have by kind of like doing some of those things differently. But it's not going to come from talking heads on the internet or MSNBC or Fox or wherever, taking a side and then arguing from that side. I mean, some of that, because you're going to have people with different perspectives. But
okay, so if we take these issues, you got people who are really trying to get at a different layer, peeling the onion back, and they're trying to look at it in more complex ways, just like all three of us do in our own worlds. And the unfortunate thing is, for the average person who's going to form an opinion on it, they're never going to sit down and have thoughtful conversations with those people.
Right.
And so they're only going to have just an uninformed opinion.
I want a simplified worldview. Wait for it, comes from my gut. I know it in my gut. Like, where does that come from, man? I know it in my gut. It smells in your gut like that. I don't.
Okay, so when I was working with, go ahead, Lori.
I just want to say, I think it's funny to think about those things, but I also always go back to growing up and seeing my dad. We're now thinking about growing up with the dad and the parents that I had, and my my dad was an electrician and he was working 2 jobs, and he was, spending his nights in crawl spaces in cities and all these things. And he was having to know what was happening in the world enough to make decisions about, should he buy a house? Could he buy a house? Or is he safe to go downtown because of this thing that's happening or that? And so, of course, he needs the cliff notes, or he just needs the simple, like, give me the 3 talking points so that I know, can I take my kids here? Should I leave them in this school? Should they go to another, right? All that stuff. So anyway, I think we need a class of people that can think and provide information to people, right? Like what we do, in each of us in different ways. But at the same time, like, people don't have time to be deciding, thinking through, meeting with people to figure out, like, what's true about vaccines. You know what I mean? So that's the reality that we're in, right? So I think it's just like, yep, given that people are like, just tell me what I need to know and what I should think.
Well, and check out the last comment over in the chat, these dummies are never going to inform themselves to believe us, right? So if they would just listen to us, we have the wisdom, and I'm guilty. I've actually read all this stuff, and that makes me, hey, maybe my buddy does have it all figured out in 5 minutes. Who knows?
But the thing is, and there's a lack of trust. Sorry, Sam. There's like, and for good reason, yada, yada, right? Maybe we're in a big major reset of the world, and that'd be awesome. Like, there's so many people that do jobs, everybody who does jobs that are not the job I do. I don't know what the hell they do. They have so much expertise that I don't have. Right. If I want something, like, I'm just like, I got to ask people. I have to, like, rely on their expertise, and I do, and I trust it, and I honor it, right? And similarly, there are people who, like, Dan, you've spent your life studying what's happening in prisons and with crime. So if somebody really wants to have a thought about that, you'd probably be the person to talk to. But we don't operate like that. We don't have time.
Well, the three of us are really are practitioners, are academic practitioners. We study and we practice. And so it's a little, I think people miss that even about academics. The idea is that we're all up in the ivory tower somewhere, stuck in our offices. And the fact is, a lot of us are out in the world, man. And we're working, we're engaging. Dan, how often do you go into a prison?
Well, when I'm teaching, at least once a week, because I teach there.
Okay, all right. So there, hang on. So then I want to take the average person. How often do they go into a prison and talk to prisoners?
Never.
The average, never. The average person, never.
You talk to those people, and I do mean those people. Hey, honey, what do you want to do tonight? You want to go out to dinner? You want to go to the movie, or you want to go down to the prison and hang out?
Yeah.
That doesn't make them bad people. Like,
no, it doesn't make them bad. But what it means is a lot of people have a misunderstanding of academics, because we're also, so many of us in particular are also practicing. We're engaging. We're not just coming up with ideas from nowhere or from reading books. But I just want to say one thing, going back to the police and defunding the police.
Oh, we lost Lori.
Well, we lost Lori. I don't know. There she is. So kind of at the peak of this, I was working with a fairly large scale police department with, I think, about 120 officers, and doing conversations and so on. And these guys, every time this came up, they were like, hey, we'll defund. We don't have a problem. Take the next 2 or 3 jobs. And instead of hiring police officers, let's hire mental health professionals like we used to have. Yeah. And then if they could actually do the jobs that we don't want to do, so we could get on with the work of policing. And we're not trained to be mental health professionals. We go out on these calls and we have to engage people. We have to talk people down from the edge, and like that, we don't have that training. Like,
it's so much worse. It's so much worse than that. Here's the thing: when you dial 911, right, and the 911 dispatcher makes a determination that there's a mental health issue or something, they have to dispatch an officer to that address, right? So we had things down here, like the record for dispatches in a I think it was like a 90-day period to a single resident was like 300 times. Like officers had to go to this particular residence, right? And that means they're not doing other things. Now we can argue whether that's a good or bad thing. Maybe the more he sleeps, the safer we are, like kind of thing. So they got once they brought this program on, they got a mental health clinician that went out and worked with this individual. It turned out he was schizophrenic, right? Was off his med. The families was at the end of the rope, didn't know what to do with them, right? And so once they had removed themselves, there was very little left. They got the clinician got the family back involved, got the guy to go to a residential facility for a short period of time. They got him stable on meds. The call stopped, right? So that's a win-win for everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
Stories are like Newcastle County, Delaware, where I'm sitting. I'm actually in Maryland, but whatever, right? When you call 911, your call gets routed one of three ways, right? Fire, EMT, or police, right? Those are your three issues that they can route that call, right? Because your 911 people are sitting in a call center, right? We just changed things down here. Not me, but the police. As a result of some of the work that's been going on, now they route you four ways, right? Fire, EMT, police, mental health. Okay. So they have mental health clinicians on call, right? So they can route your call that way, and it becomes a mental health issue. Now, for now, they're still sending officers out because you don't know what's going to happen when you get there. Okay. So yeah, and we hear the same thing down here. The cops are like, we don't know what to do in these situations. This is so outside my training. I'm clueless. You know what I know how to do? Chill out bar fights and arrest people. That's basically our gig.
But they learn, but the cops, they learn it because they have to learn it, and they get training. They get some training, but by their own admission, what I've heard, not enough, and it's not their primary work, and so therefore they have to be trained in so many different things, but a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and so on, and so there was an old timer there, and he said, 25 years ago in this community, there were 3 community mental health centers available. And all these people were being dealt with in these community mental health centers. And they were mostly publicly, state and locally funded, right? And he said, not one of them is open at this point. And so this is it. This is the police. I did a ride along. Lori and I did ride alongs. And on my ride along, we had, I think, 7 calls, and 6 of them were mental health calls. That the person, the cop, the person I was riding with, they knew before we even, as soon as the call came in, I said, oh yeah, we're going to go visit so-and-so. And I'm like, oh man, this is it. So defund the police. The idea being, and here you got these cops going like, yeah, go ahead, defund us if you spend the money on this thing that we need to be spending the money on. So yeah.
And one does need to be a little bit careful, like the old, what if we're wrong thing, Great book, by the way, Chuck Klosterman, What If We're Wrong? On all kinds of social issues and stuff like that. What if we're wrong?
That's a great question.
So here's the thing. Do we really want our police involved in the mental health realm? Because now the way, remember the discourse and the pendulum and all that, where it's moving now is like the acceptance that police are dealing with mental health, right? And mental health issues. So the answer seems to be, let's bring in a clinician to wait for it, work with the police. Okay. So you're still in a law enforcement arena. Or is this better handled like over here somewhere You know, so that if you get that fourth kind of thing with the you know, you call 911 and it's a mental health thing, it's routed completely outside of the law enforcement arena. We're not there yet in where I'm at. But my hunch is, I mean, I know it's being discussed because we have these kind of like, is this the smartest thing we can do? It might not be, you know. Many years ago, somebody said, "Hey, let's build a prison. That'll make a lot of sense." You know, made perfect sense at the time, like robbing the wall.
Yeah, we didn't, you know, well, this is the idea. We didn't have prisons. I mean, you know, at some point in time, we build the first prisons.
Well, you know, we actually shoot a lot more people too. It's yeah, there's
no, this is all the stuff that we imagine are just a given and true are not necessarally a given.
Well, it gets back
nor
to your
true.
you know, the whole what is true thing, and it's like malleable, it's moving, and what's right, you know, what's right today might not be right tomorrow. You know, to quote the famous American philosopher Ronnie Van Zant from Leonard Skinner, "What's right for you might not be right for me."
Yeah.
You know. And then
Ronnie Van Zant.
Power dynamic, you know, the power dynamic wormhole about who gets listened to. Well, power buys a lot of truth.
Yeah.
He buys a lot of power. Elon.
Yeah. That is true.
I'm wondering, Sam, just I'm just speaking this out because I tend to not watch a chat when I'm talking. That's like blind spot of mine, but I do know
it's also totally distracting.
Yeah.
But I know
I'll kind of keep an eye on certain things, but
I mean, I've seen some questions. Well, anyway, is there something you think we should respond to directly? If you've been tracking, or does Jeff think?
Yeah, Jeff, do you have? We'll ask Jeff. Are there any questions that really are worth responding to?
There's many things that
we're going to rate the questions. What?
Yeah,
Jeff?
no. That's not
gatekeeper of questions that are worth answering here. So Jeff, no pressure, buddy. No pressure.
Give me a few seconds. I'll get
say it differently. That there's some conversations that are happening, and I'm somehow hard time knowing sometimes whether the questions are to us or to each other. So maybe Jeff's tracking.
They're through the internet. Oh wow! This is like.
This will make it a little bit easier for the things to pop up at the bottom.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
But this isn't a question, but I did want to point this comment out because it was from Pedro, a staff member with us.
Truth exists in a space where our perspectives converge, and its emergence is dependable on our ability to disagree constructively. Well, just so lovely, Pedro.
Truth is what we agree on.
I would
disagree on constructively. Yeah.
I think that it's putting the pieces, being willing to put pieces into that convergence space. I think is what you're
working on a puzzle at home.
Why do you say that?
You keep going to putting pieces together, Madam.
Oh, that's a very good insight, Dan. No, it's not. No, not. It's just
it's wrong.
No, it's the only way I can discuss what I see when it comes to like. Come on, it's not about like this piece is the one that wins. It's like when you're putting the world together, it's like, or a puzzle together. It's like you need all the pieces. But anyway, the metaphor. But do you disagree? Do you see it differently? I mean, of course you do.
What different? I got all confused on the puzzle.
I thought you said that wasn't a good analogy or metaphor.
Oh, no. I just wondered because you brought up puzzles a couple times, and I'm like, because I like the brain is a funny thing. I'm like, I wonder if Lori's like working on a puzzle at home, and it's just like in her head that it had nothing not advancing the conversation in any way.
That's not true.
Okay, but I have one for it. So David Hawthorne just asked, how do you know what pieces to trust?
The blue ones.
Yeah.
I respond to David because I get asked this question so much with. So David, just so you know, I facilitate discussions and have endlessly, and then train and help other people to develop that practice. And so so that's especially in the most contentious kinds of things that I work with. How do you trust? And I think what happens for me in this kind of context, which is where actually different ideas come up and are able to clash, is starting out with trusting that there's some kernel of truth to what most people think, right? It comes from somewhere and they might not even know where. And so the trust, so first there's that. There's just the premise that people aren't lying. Maybe they are, but for the most part, that's not what I find. People are doing their best to like say what they think, and they might not even know why they think it. And so anyway, so there's a process that happens. This isn't just like here's how I can identify it. Here's how I know what to trust. But in a process, when you start asking someone about what they think or see, they start to tell themselves what they think or see. And sometimes they adjust in the process of articulating over some time, right? And sometimes just by other people asking them questions, you start to see, maybe that's not actually based on, maybe that's hearsay. Maybe that was gossip. Maybe that, right? So I think when you submit an idea to a process with other people, you start, the things that are more true start to like either emerge, however you want to see it, or they like hold weight, and people keep coming back to those same ideas. And you see that in groups of people. Like you don't have to agree with someone initially to actually realize, oh, wow, that makes sense what they just said. I can see that. And I, Lori, see that happening all the time. So I don't feel like I have to identify what's true per se, but when you go through a process, you start to see what really holds water. Which might be the best we can do besides get to truth. I don't know. I hope that
You're willing to go through the process.
So say that again, Dan.
You're willing to go through the process.
Yeah, but right.
Some people are less willing. And here's the thing, some people don't need it. Right? I think some of us are just driven by a natural curiosity, right? To kind of do these kind of things. Others are less so, and that's not a judgment thing. Like, there are people that are very comfortable with their view, and
and just want to add to that, Dan. It's the same thing.
That's fine. I don't care.
The analogy of health and medicine, right? There's plenty of people that are like, I don't feel like paying attention to my body every day or my diet or how much I do. I'm not doing that. I'm not tracking all that. I'm living, right? But there may be a moment in their lives where they're like, oh, I need some help because now I'm sick or now I'm this. And so what I'm aware of is that you don't have to want to be able to talk to other people or want to go through a process like this. But if we knew that there were processes that could actually help us get somewhere, it might help us in those times when we become unhealthy, right? In our marriage, in our family, in our community, in our nation, right? So yeah, you don't have to like it to sometimes have to go to a hospital or to a dentist or whatever. And I feel like it's a similar realm, but we just don't see it that way.
Or here's one though, or go to some conversation or article or like or book or something where someone is taking these really complex issues and trying to break them down into the various parts so that if you get through that, you actually will see the layers of complication. Like, Dan, earlier you gave the example of immigration. You can find that. It's not difficult, but you're going to have to really work to engage that debate and the multiple layers. You're going to have to take a thread and spin it around and run it through all sorts of things. It's just going to take time.
Okay, wait. Net positive or net negative? Go, Sam. Immigration, go.
Whew. Both.
Break it
net
down.
Positive. Go, man. Everything is immigration. Human beings have been emigrating since we came out of Africa. Man, our hominid home.
I don't care about coming out of Africa 5,000, 20,000 years ago. I care about, the United States of America in 2025.
Yeah, net positive for sure. Yeah. No, are we talking? But now, is it legal? Is it documented immigration or undocumented immigration? Right. That's a whole different story. Okay. It's net positive for sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the problem, right? So it's going to take me an hour.
I honestly don't know, because I would have because this is the way my brain is. I would have to spend way more time reading about it than I have. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my gut, right? My gut is like, well, it's probably a good thing. Right. And that's just, probably my bleeding hearted liberal upbringing or whatever. But like there's 100 things wrong with that question, right? By what metric? For who? Right.
Okay, well, here's one. So one of the first people that are pushing back against these new Trump policies and sending people back are the big meat, both pork and poultry and beef, cows, processors, right, and big agricultural processors, right, big ag, and who need the inexpensive labor. And so we say, okay, well, they wouldn't need inexpensive labor if they would pay more. Well, if they pay more, everything that we buy is going to cost more. So it's going to be like eggs right now. Eggs are $8 a dozen. Yeah, $8 a dozen. So, okay. So now suddenly chicken goes, chicken goes up to $10 a pound. Like, all right, eggs are $8 a dozen. Let's say that all of this stuff starts to happen in this way. So that's going to be a net negative for anybody who's consuming. So nobody's going to want that, and no one's going to do these jobs. And so we're stuck. So it's net positive, even for the consumers.
Thank you.
All right, there you go. I mean, that's just a given of the economics of it. I mean, I don't have even any forgetting about the human lives at stake. It's just kind of like, man, every attempt to arrest and deport all of the workers who are working in all these jobs ends up being stopped. Man, we pull back, we stop it, because it's just things start shutting down. So there's one for you, man. And someone wrote, building analyst wrote about trees and shrubs and trays and landscaping. Yeah, but none of that's necessary. We could let trees go see, we have lots of people without documentation who are doing a lot of that work, but whatever, don't cut the grass and don't trim the shrubs and don't trim the trees. That's fine. But that's pork and beef and chicken processing plants and eggs. That's a whole different story, man. Like that you can't just not do. The shrubs, all the landscaping, we don't need to do that. But the food, that's
there is also trades. Right. So, we need houses built. We need people to, plumbers and, sheetrockers and all that kind of stuff. And people do like having nice shrubs and,
Yeah, they do like having it, but it's not essential. The other things are essential. Yeah.
You're just saying food is essential, and
quite essential, man. People are going to push back. People are going to push back really hard on that. Honestly, it sounds nice. It sounds great. Yeah. No, I think the average person in the U.S. who's like, yeah, send them all back. Like, what do you mean send them all back? These are the people supplying food for your table, man. Like, I mean, I get it. You can't just have lots and lots of people living off the books in any society at all. But how many people right now, even anybody who's listening to this, is going to say, oh man, what's this knucklehead saying? Like, maybe I better go investigate that just a little bit. How many people are in these trades? How many are working in the meat processing plants, et cetera? How many people are actually going to go research that? It doesn't take.
I don't want to do that. The ball game's on at 8.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't, and then we don't.
Bad way. I don't mean that in a bad way. That's what this is literally why people have government to figure this shit out for us, so I don't have to.
And when the government is operating with bureaucrats who are trying to get to the best decisions, which is what happens most of the time in most places are people, government employees, trying to get to the best answers to complex questions,
Can
whether
we
they
get
do
to-
or not. You know,
Can we
Go
get
ahead.
to the question? Green-eyed lady. She said the reason why a dozen eggs are $8 is because chicken
no,
farmers.
I get that. That's a different thing. That's because of the bird flu. So yeah.
Wait,
No, I get that.
Stop. I wasn't asking if you
Yeah.
got it. I was just saying, can we add that to the conversation about, right? Because it's part of, this is what it is, right? That there's all kinds of things feeding into
Yeah.
where the
Yeah,
hell
yeah,
we're
yeah.
at right now. So I just actually, and Sam, I just wondered if you could.
So should we?
Yeah, I just want to say I was just using that as an example of we're all freaking out about the fact that eggs are $8 a dozen. I wasn't implying that that's because of immigrants not working in egg processing plants. I was just saying like the shock of $8 a dozen eggs. Well, that's a
similar.
big shock for people. So now imagine it's chicken and it's pork and it's beef and like, oh man, and it's blueberries and it's asparagus and it's, corn. It's everything, everything, all the veggies we're buying. Like, oh man, that's pretty serious.
I also
So-
wonder, I don't know that, I'm sure we can't get into this now, but there's just another thread. I keep hearing this thought and, keeps going through my mind where people say, and I think this is, I don't know if this is a left or right thing, but I keep hearing for so long people saying Americans don't want to do those jobs. And I don't know what that means. I know from my brother who's an electrician and works with guys, he can't get any Americans to work with him. He only seems to be able to
Can't
get.
find anybody, man. And
Yeah,
he's starting them out at like
Well,
$35 an hour to get trained.
And even like, Penn Tech, places around here where we live, like it's really hard. There's some really cool programs, but there's not a lot of people that want to go into the trades, or which I'm like, anyway, I just wonder where does that come from and where does that fit? And
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Dan, do you have a thought about that?
I don't want to do those jobs. But I don't have to. So I have options, so it's all about the option structure.
I don't know if it is though, because that's actually what, like, again, coming from a working class family, like to me, that work is very honorable. It takes a lot of intelligence to build things, to know how to build things, et cetera. And that's just one piece of it. And so I don't know, like if you don't, especially in this moment where there's many people who are like, universities, that's ridiculous. Those people have their heads up their asses. Then I'm thinking like, then we be honoring people that are doing policing and all, and some of the trades and such. But what do you mean? Like, I actually feel, me personally, like I would do electrical work, whatever work. I mean, that's all good work. It's significant.
Oh, yeah. Have you paid an electrician lately?
Yeah,
course.
dude.
I mean, most of those people make way more money than I do. So if you're just looking at money, but anyway, what does that mean, and where does that come from?
What, people don't want those jobs?
Yeah, I mean, Dan, you're saying, that works for me because I don't want those jobs, but I'm like,
for me, I'm not talking about anybody else, right? So
Right,
there are, and here's the thing. Okay, again, I go back to my prison class, right? I do a thing because like my prison class is an inside-out class. Half my class are traditional UD students. Half my class are people currently serving sentences in a prison, right? And so I do this little exercise just to open some eyes, right? And we have a conversation, and I say, hey, of all you outside students, the conversation at the dinner table, right, about college, was there like a decision whether you would go to college or not? And the vast majority of them are like, what are you talking about? No, I just assumed I would go to college, right? It's not like, I was going to consider the option of being a plumber or an electrician, or work in landscaping or farming or something like that, and then I turn it and I ask my inside students, the people that are serving time in prison, And I say, what was the conversation like for you folks about college? And the vast majority of them are like, what the hell are you talking about? That didn't happen, right? And so the opportunity,
There was no conversation at
there
all.
was no
about
conversation that included that. It might be, well, usually it's like you're gonna have to go get a job and like make some money. So to ask, that's going to depend on who you ask that question to, because we're nothing if not stratified around here. So would there be, like, I was thinking when you said that people won't do those jobs. I had a great uncle, Jack. It was my dad's uncle, right? My family's from Iowa, right? And Jack and some of his buddies, this would be like in probably the 30s and that kind of stuff. And they would leave late summer. I'm not sure the exact dates, and they would go down to Texas, right? And they would work the harvest north, right? And they would, and like they'd be back. Like when the harvest got up to Iowa, they would finish. They would finish up there. So they would do those kind of jobs. So that was a different era. That was a different time. Things have changed. There's a lot more white collar, if you will, jobs. And so, would people, people would do those jobs for the right amount of money, I think. And if they didn't have other opportunities.
This is an empirical question that I feel like would be a really nice conversation to have with a bunch of people, because I have asked students who were graduating and said, if you could make more money become electrical contractor, whatever. They're like, nope. Because there's something,
they've been taught.
It's off brand, right? But I really would like to know more about where that idea comes from, because I really wonder if it's even a left-right kind of thing. It might be something that I don't know. I think it's really important to look at, because certainly many jobs have been, farmed out to other countries that used to be here, right? So there's that whole thing. So now we have white collar jobs. Are they really white collar? Anyway.
Or it just seems, you go to college, you spend a lot of money in college to get a degree in sociology, and I ask my students, what are you going to do with that? Like, you could have gone, you could be, by the end of your 4 years studying sociology, you could be a fully trained plumber or electrician, and you'd have been making a lot of money in those 4 years, and you finish and you're going to make a ton of money. You're going to do really well. You're going to make far more than you'll make as a sociologist, whatever that is, whatever you decide to do.
Schedule. You won't be sitting in a cubicle somewhere, whether it's at a university you
can call your own hours. You can do whatever. But like Lori's brother, he almost all of his employees were born outside the United States, and he just cannot. And and he's willing. He's going to start at $35 an hour. And it just doesn't matter. And Dan, you'll appreciate this. It seems like invariably, if he finds an American born here,
who's willing
in the U.S., who's really willing to do it, not a green card holder, right? But an American who's born here who's willing to do it. Invariably, they're touched by the justice system. Right? They're on parole, they're coming out of prison, they're this, they're that, they're whatever, right?
Well, here's the thing.
Her brother went to college, by the way. So both, so it's not like he.
This is the game that we've played, right? So you can't do the experiment.
Yeah.
We already did. And this is where we're at now.
But I will just say, just at the level of, I don't know, zeitgeist maybe is maybe the word for it, but I was going to say vibe. The vibe that is ever present around me in a place at a university is that work is less valuable
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Mhm.
And I know that I'm not saying anything groundbreaking, but what I am saying is like, I feel that a lot, right? Coming from a family, those are my roots. I grew up in a town, everybody's father was a plumber, worked at the lumber yard, this or that. That's just it. And we didn't talk about college. Like my dad was so happy that he was able to put us through college because that wasn't part of our world. But I just think that at universities, and I think this goes to a question that someone had for you, Sam, which I'll say in a second. It's so deeply embedded in the consciousness, the culture of the university that is lower work. And it blows me away because I just see the expert knowledge that people have that are doing trades, right? That like I would never have. Anyway, and I can't, I just want to say enough how I kind of feel I mean, it pisses me off actually, but it's really heartbreaking that that's the way university people think of people doing just other work. And I think that we have something to pay for that, really.
Yeah, but if I could push back just a little, it's not just universities. Anywhere you go where you have white collar populations, you're going to have the same level of kind of disparagement of the trades. And
Did they not come from university?
Mostly college educated people who have been indoctrinated into the worldview that like are
yeah.
yeah.
And a lot of times, you know, you have parents of blue collar parents who are, you know, are telling their kids like, I don't want you to have the life I had. But they're oftentimes not understanding. Listen, man, but if your kid is going to come just get your average college degree,
right,
then the kid's going to have the same life you had, just instead of crawling around crawl spaces or underneath sinks and toilets, he's going to be, or she's going to be stuck inside of a cubicle. And that's not a way to live either.
If you spent your life, I'm going to speak for people that I know nothing about. If you spent your life crawling around crawl spaces, you would call that a win. That's the American dream, right?
Absolutely.
I worked really hard to send my daughter to college so she could sit at a monitor and, you know, like
not do what I had to do
and look at spreadsheets all day.
And Dan,
a win.
Important because also, you know, all around the world, including in the US, just people who certainly people who are working in agriculture in countries that are less developed, getting a school, right, just is really important. So I don't want to disparage that. So I'm really glad you brought that up. I think just, you know, can we just honor all the humans? You know what I mean?
No, we're humans. Let's assert ourselves. Go team, go team. My team's better than your team. My team's better than your team.
But Sam, there was a question that goes back a while, but it was to you about students. Are they most just like the demographic of the working class versus not? And I think we've seen a difference over the years, the decades. Did you see that comment? And did you respond to it?
No, I didn't. But I can say that probably 10% of my class would be working class or below. Yeah, about 10%. That's it. I mean, this is where we've gone at a place like Penn State. That didn't used to be the case. Dan, when you were here, I don't remember what the tuition was, but my guess is it costs you about $8,000 a year, maybe $9,000.
My dad worked at Penn State, so I got the discount. I was a returning adult, so I got FIA grants, and so we did not pay a whole lot.
Okay, but probably tuition was $8,000.
Yeah, it was probably
and now we're over 30. And with room and board and costs and so on, it's a lot of money, man. It's expensive to go here.
Yeah,
and so a lot of people
could they?
No, they can't. And so people go to other schools that are less expensive, but you know,
or they don't go to school and they learn a trade.
Or they don't go.
You know, somebody
or they don't go and they go.
Up, but somebody posted something about, you know, tradespeople making $300,000 a year.
Yeah.
And some of them do. And that's
and also just like, you know, also people were posting earlier just about like learning all these things on YouTube. Absolutely. Like you don't need to get somebody to stamp something that says you did X, Y, or Z, right? If you can learn it in some other way.
So what is the future of the university, Dr. Mulvey?
Exactly. I actually think it should be.
Are you guys doing async classes yet, where you record all your lectures and then they play the lecture? I did an async class last summer and I hated it. They want me to do another one this summer, and I'm going to hate it.
No, listen, I'll be in Korea next Tuesday. Next Tuesday, we have a guest. Urban will be in class with DJ. And then on Thursday, we're going to play an old lecture from a live stream. And then I'll be in Korea.
The same for that lecture as you would if you gave it as you did the first time? Because my electrician can't come over here and do that.
Yeah, I get paid the same. Yeah,
I think we're working ourselves out of a job here.
Yeah, that's all right.
If I could get it on YouTube, and I mean,
yeah.
No,
I think that's for
the future. That's
why do you need? Why not do that? Honestly, like, why do we? What this insanity of thinking that, how often there's no Socratic conversation going on. It's just information that's being passed. It's probably different with your
college about your class, or is college about Xenos?
It's really about Xenos. Yeah.
Should
by
it
and
be,
large. You know what it is? It's about learning to live on your own. I mean, you got kids, we got kids coming from all over the country and all over the world, and they come up here, or they're even coming from down in Philadelphia, and they're learning to live on their own.
They can go to camp, adult camp. You know what I mean? You don't need a university for that.
Go to the military. Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
That's just, or just move out of your house, or don't move out of your house. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one way of thinking about life.
I agree. No, I don't think universities are essential. I think there are some areas of life where universities matter. And I think the liberal arts matter. I think it's really good if people develop some ideas for how to think about, philosophical questions or something. I don't know.
Like, I get that from some dude on Google or YouTube or wherever the hell.
Yeah, you could, but you wouldn't. You wouldn't do that because you're going to scroll through your Instagram reels or TikTok reels because it's more entertaining. You're really not going to watch an hour-long lecture. Look, people to watch my class, watch Social 19. I think it's really mildly entertaining. At least it is for me. But, on every video after a couple weeks, we'll have 2,000 views, maybe 2,500, and that's it. Once in a while, we'll get 14 or 15,000, and once in a while, we'll get 100 or 200,000 on a 75-minute class. But all the people who could be watching this, they're probably spinning through TikTok or Instagram or YouTube.
You mean
Shorts
as a way of learning? Is that what you're saying?
As a way of learning. Yeah. So you're not going to.
But that doesn't mean that if it was something more practical, I'm not saying it's not practical in some ways, but that it was like, here, I'm going to teach you how to do this thing in 75 minutes. You know what I mean? That somebody'd be like, all right, I'll take 75 minutes for that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why is Dan laughing?
I was laughing because Dan was laughing when you said it was something more practical. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's okay. Yeah. I don't know, but I don't understand the purpose of. I think it's what's the purpose of school and education? It's just socialize people to be able to sit still. We put little kids in rooms.
Now
and 9 or 10 months out of the year, and we teach them how to sit still and pay attention, right?
Baby, docile bodies.
And if they have ADD, if they have some way in which they can't, we give them some pills and we get them to sit still, and that's kind of what it is. Pay attention so that ultimately you can participate in society in a reasonable way. So when you're stuck in a traffic jam, for example, you're not ramming your car into other cars. You're not freaking out. You're just in the traffic jam and you're just dealing with it because you learn that starting in kindergarten, just to sit quietly while things are happening around you very slowly. And
So
that's the purpose of school.
Google and YouTube, are they good at teaching people how to sit quietly and be patient? Is that?
Yeah, maybe like this, right? Just this with the little finger thing. Just go one after another. In a way, maybe that's what they're doing. But it's in a screen, and so when you're stuck in a traffic jam or something, like you are out in the world. So
you're
maybe
just saying, you're just talking about some of our institutions are really low key socialization mechanisms, civilizing mechanisms. If you will, right?
No,
so
but
what, Dan?
You know, the last Marxist has been saying this forever. We're creating, you know, cogs to go in the wheel of the machine, basically, right? So we got to send you to school to do the trade that you could do. You know, that argument's been around forever.
Yeah, well, and there's a truth to it. That's part of this whole public education movement, right? Yeah, there is a truth to it.
Back to a truth. I said so. A truth. So are we back to
a truth?
Are we back to?
It's not the truth. It is a truth to that. Yeah, yeah. Oh, we'll stick with that. All right, listen, man. We can keep going or we can stop.
I think we should pause here.
Wait, Dan, I want to hear just one story. What's the coolest story you have from class inside of a prison? You got like 15 University of Delaware students. You got 15 prisoners in the program who have all been vetted, by the way. So these are more model prisoners. They've had to demonstrate.
Right now, I don't know if you know this, but Joseph Biden on the way out the door commuted a whole shitload of sentences, right? And so in Delaware, which is where I teach, a bunch of guys got sentences commuted who have served very lengthy sentences, right? But the way they did it was they wanted them to go like where I'm at right now is in a reentry facility. So you do your like prison time and then you kind of come here and it's kind of you're living there and there's a barbed wire, there's fences around it and all that, but you're allowed to check out and come back during the day. Not quite a halfway house, not quite a halfway in house, a weird kind of thing. The way they commuted the sentences was to have these guys here. So the guy I work with, he calls me up and says, "Hey, O'Connell, I got these guys that have been gone like 20, 30 years. And what I'd like to do is have them in your class because these are people that haven't had a conversation with anybody pretty much other than like, you know, another incarcerated person or a correctional person for like decades. And I'd like to use your class as a way to just kind of like get them used to hanging out with people who aren't like prisonized, if you will." So we get all kinds of interesting folks. It's going to be an interesting semester with some of those.
Wait, so Dan, you have 30 students from the inside?
15 inside, 15 outside.
Oh, so of those 30 people who are in this reentry place, 15, you're going to just have 15 of those.
15 are currently serving sentences.
Wow. And who are your best students when you do this?
What do you mean?
The best students? I mean, like who?
The ones who
my
do
experience
well in the class, Sam.
Yeah. Who my experience in the different things I've done inside prisons is prisoners are just so hungry for.
Yes.
Like they're always prepared. They've done the reading. They've done their homework. They've done everything.
Outside students can write a better paper. I was dumb enough to give a quiz in there one time, man. Like a multiple choice kind of thing. I even had a freaking Scantron just because I'm lazy and didn't want to grade. I think it was a fucking disaster. And not because the inside students are not smart, because they are, but because sitting down with a number 2 pencil and taking a quiz was not something they were good at or used to. And boxing them in, problem was they overthought everything, right? Boxing them into A, B, C, D answers was not really their thing. So we didn't do that again. But in terms of what's cool and what kind of stuff, I mean, we do a poetry jam every semester, which is fun because it's the ultimate leveler, because the outside students are scared to death of poetry and the inside students are scared to death of poetry. So I make them do poetry just as kind of a torture thing, But no, it's really good. It's really good because they always end up embracing it. It ends up being the funnest night of the semester. There's a small wooden stage at the front of the room that they use for thing. A number of years ago, we played that thing. We played that thing like a drum and all sang Tupac, which singing Tupac in a prison is subversive on its face. So I thought that was fun. And there's eye-opening moments all the time. Because we bring these people in who are super book smart and have read I take mostly criminal justice folks. Actually, the best way to get into my class is to say you want to be a police officer, because that's exactly who I want sitting next to somebody who's sitting in a jail cell for 16 weeks, so that you can learn a thing or two about them and from them. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. A lot more fun than sitting in my cubicle looking at spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's cool, man. Hey, Dan, you're not on social media, are you?
I am religiously not on social media. I have a Facebook account. I think I might even have an Instagram account, because somebody at our center was like, "Hey, we're getting an Instagram. We need followers, so everybody sign up." So I signed up, and I was like, "This is the dumbest fucking thing I ever seen." Not as fast as I could. And I check my Facebook account just to kind of like, I don't know, for high school buddies and stuff like that. And then I do that once every few months and run. But that's about the
extent. All right. Someone was asking, so there's your answer, Dave.
I've read enough Jonathan Hyatt books and articles to be like that. And here's the thing: it's not. I'm not going to disparage social media. I am an addictive person. If I start messing around on that stuff, right, I will mainlining it fast, right? And I'll be like, my wife I'll be like the hairy goon that, like I'll be the Cheeto eating guy in the basement, screaming at somebody who's, not who they are or whatever. But I'm also a firm believer in editors.
Yeah.
That's just my upbringing. My dad was a journalist. Editors play an important role in the world. Two source fact checking is a useful thing, even though they screw it up all the time. But it goes back to the truth thing, right? Is this bullshit or is this not?
Well, it's hard though. It's hard to fact. There's so much to fact check, man. There is so much. Well, I did a.
Are there 15 million? Are there 12 million people above the age of 150 collecting Social Security checks? It's pretty easy.
All right.
By the way, the answer to that is no.
Yeah.
The missing value field on date of birth for the COBOL software that they wrote that stuff in is like some date in 1580 something. That's the default, and so they were defaulting all these fields to that. And so when they queried it, it was like, oh my God, there's all these old people in here. It's like, it's called missing data, man. So that's
I don't think people, dude. Okay, we're gonna end on this. Can you just tell that story really fast? Because I think there are people who are listening who probably would be good for them to know that Social Security story.
There was a software thing called COBOL. This was before C++, and a lot of the code that a lot of these, like the Social Security Agency, was written in was COBOL, right? And so if you had missing data on date of birth or date of death, not date of birth, date of death, it defaulted to some date in like the 1500. SPSS, our statistical software, does the same thing with dates, right? It builds everything off a date, and so you can do date math. Right.
So, and the reason this is important is because a lot of people submitted their paperwork when their relatives died over the past decades. They submitted they made a phone call.
You're automatically dropped at like 112 or something like that, and there's so few people that ever hit that.
But people made phone calls. People stopped getting their payments, but they didn't get the data to get inputted into the system, but they were no longer getting payments.
Right. And actually, like Wired Magazine has an article on this that you can pull up. It's on the line. I guess if that's social media, then I'm on social media. But they kind of dissected this guy, and you can see the chart, and it's like of the death dates, there's like people who died before 1900, people who died before 1920 or whatever the hell it is, and it's like people who died before 1870, and it's like the vast majority of those people are people who died before 1870 because they're defaulting to this default field. And it gets even better, if you will. We know this because in 2021, there was a study commissioned. The Social Security people were like told to go clean up your data, or at least take a look at it, because people were aware of some of this stuff. And so they did that. The preliminary report, which you can go look at because it's online, was delivered in 2023, which I believe was prior to 2025. So this, like all of this stuff that these people are finding.
The Doge. You're talking about Doge. The
Doge
Trump
bag,
and,
if you will.
Yeah. The Doge people.
This data has been.
No, but hang on.
Said,
but the issue is that they came out with these statements that there are all these, thousands or tens of thousands of people still in the Social Security system, and so they're all collecting payments.
Okay, the first part of that true. They are still in the system. They are. So like, okay, so what is true? Are they in the system? Yeah, they're in the system. Are they getting payments? No. Right. So you can be in the system and not be getting payments. So if you read a lot of the things, it's like there's all these people in the system that are over 100.
You assume they're getting payments, and they're
right, and they let your brain make that next leap.
Yeah.
So as a way to end, I think that I forget who it is, but asked multiple times throughout this engagement, like, what are the sources that you would recommend, or that you read, or that you think are the most fair? I don't have the exact wording.
I rely a lot on the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. The New York Times is left, the Wall Street Journal is right. And the funny thing is, when you go to the news page on those two periodicals, they almost 100% overlap, right? Something happened in Germany or Italy or Washington today. Here's what happened. So there's that part. You can go to the editorial pages and get some other stuff. I subscribe to the Atlantic magazine, who is a little bit left, but amazingly, I think, centered in their own way. And they have a lot of different content from different providers. I do Wired just for the techie stuff. I do podcasts. I do the Bulwark podcast. I'm a subscriber to that. That's a bunch of old. It's actually kind of weird. It's all the guys and gals who were at the National Review before it went defunct. And so they're hard anti-Trumpers, but nor are they Democrat kind of. They're not really woke by any stretch.
They're classical conservatives. Is what they are.
Old school. So I like that view. When I don't feel like reading, I feel like listening. I also do the Crooked Media, which is the Pod Save America guys. They do a lot of stuff, which is decidedly a progressive left view. But that going in, and so I kind of stir all that. Kind of up, and it just leaves me.
Do you dig into The Economist at all?
I used to. I haven't lately. There's another cool thing called NOAA, which is News Over Audio, which is actually kind of cool because basically it's AI reading news stories. But that's not the interesting part. Is who is on there, because The Economist will have stuff on there. Foreign Affairs will have pieces on there. Harvard Business, or all kinds of weird shit shows up on it. So if I'm driving to the grocery store, I can read, Brent Scrocos. I think he's fucking dead, but whatever. Some article in Foreign Affairs talking some kind of weird shit.
I also wanted to. I don't know this well enough, but I subscribe to Ground News. Do you know that, Dan?
No, what is it?
It's like I'm really trying to figure it out, but it's an app. It's an app, and it shows the news stories, and then it shows the bias. Concern, is it more like who's blind?
I've seen things like this.
It's called Ground News, and so every time they post a story, they post multiple versions of it, and then they show you there's like an infographic where you can see like where it's posted and is it in the left's blind spot, is it in right's blind spot, and I honestly can't fully engage it enough to know what I think about it, but I love
it's a Zoomer thingy. So wait, am I a Zoomer? Am I a Boomer? What the hell am I?
We are.
You're a
Gen X.
What is Zoomer?
No, you're kind of. You're on the Boomer.
You're on the edge of being a Boomer.
Oh no, I know I'm on the edge of being a Boomer. It's
I guess a Zoomer then.
You're gonna get Social Security.
Yeah.
That's not funny.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's one. And I personally, I also always open CNN and Fox right next to each other and just look at what it's more of like the immediate knee jerk, if you will. And I don't say that they're equivalent, but I do that. I really always look at
they try to be instantaneous. Right? And they have to fill up 24 hours a day with I mean, if we let this thing go on for 24 hours, which is starting to feel like it is, pretty soon we gonna be talking some bullshit.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
We've already talked a lot of bullshit, but c'est la vie.
Yeah. No, that's it, man. All right, listen. So with that, Jeff, we'll cut off, and we'll do class tomorrow at 3:00. Yeah. Thanks, Dan,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, don't log off, Dan.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Lori. Thanks,
all
everybody in the chat.
Be well. Yeah, be well, everyone.